Hi, this is Kim Knight here from the Art of Health and Science of Wellbeing, aka the Kiwi Health Detective. And today I'm going to talk about how and why your digestive tract is designed to do a lot more than just digest food. So let's look at digestion. What is digestion? We don't really think about it very often, but there's a lot going on inside our body when we take in food and between the stage that we take it in and we let go of what we don't need. So there are 5 core stages of digestion. First of all, we have to check, is it safe? Is this safe to eat? So we might smell the food. Does it smell okay? We'll put it on our tongue. Does it taste okay? We'll look at it. We might touch it. So in other words, we're using the senses. We're using our eyes, our nose, and our mouth, and our tongue. And often we don't think about that because we do it automatically, but it's a really, really important part of digestion. And the reason for explaining what's going on physically to start with is going to become apparent when I talk about the deeper meaning of digestion. So bear with me. So the step 1 is that we check, is our food safe? Is what we're about to put into our body and into our digestive tract safe for us? Because if it isn't, we might put our body in danger. And the second stage then is to swallow. We swallow whatever we've put in our mouth. And then the third stage is our body digests it starts to digest what we've put inside our stomach. And then the stage after that is assimilation. Our body absorbs what is good, it absorbs the nutrients and what is useful and what it needs. And then the 5th stage is to expel or discard what we don't need, what is no longer useful. So those are the 5 stages of digestion. And if you're looking at the video, which is on YouTube, you can see here the organs of the digestive system, which start with the salivary glands, where our digestion actually starts, our esophagus, where we swallow, goes into the stomach. Then we have the small intestine, and going into that and is the gallbladder and the liver and the pancreas excreting enzymes into these different organs. And then we move into the large intestine, and then finally into the rectum and the anus. So what I want to talk about though today really is emotional digestion and the stages of emotional digestion, which correlate exactly with physical digestion. But most people have not thought of this. So we not only need to assess, is our physical environment safe? We're constantly assessing, is my environment in general, nothing to do with the physical environment, is my emotional environment safe? Do I feel safe? So for a human being, it's critical that we feel both physically safe but also emotionally safe. So as far as emotional digestion is concerned, first of all, we're going to check, do I feel safe? And we will use our senses to determine that, using our eyes and our ears, and even our smell and our taste. And then we will swallow our emotions. We have to swallow our emotions. And then we have to break down and digest our emotions. And then we have to assimilate and absorb our emotions. And then we have to expel or discard what we don't need. So our digestive system is designed to do a lot more than just digest our physical food. It is absolutely designed to deal with our emotions and our environment and how we feel about what is going on in our environment. And our body actually has to process all of that for us. But most people are not aware that it's doing that. And therefore they're not actually connecting the dots between what is going on emotionally and what is going on physically. Because if we're having trouble digesting our emotions, then we're going to perhaps sooner or later turn up with some physical symptoms which show that we're not really digesting our emotions well enough. So I want to come now just to sidestep, but it is connected to our brain. And to show you the connection between the brain and the digestive system. So we have various parts of our brain which are designed to do different things. And what I'm going to be talking about right now is the part of our brain called the reptilian brain, which is located in the brainstem. And this is the oldest part of our brain. It is the part that developed first as we were evolving, and it's all to do with survival. Am I going to survive in my environment? So the really interesting thing about this brainstem is that there are relays, what are called brain relays, in the brainstem which relate directly with the gut. So if we do an MRI scan and do a crosscut through the brainstem, when issues are happening inside our gut, they light up in a different part or a certain part of the brainstem. And what researchers have discovered is that the gut shows up in the brainstem MRI scans. And so the particular organs of the gut, such as the stomach and the liver and the pancreas and the duodenum and the small intestines and the large intestines, which includes the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, and then the rectum, they all show up in these MRI scans of the brainstem, showing that there is a direct correlation between the brainstem, this reptilian part of our brain, which is to do with survival, and our gut, which is to do with survival. And what's really interesting about this is that when we're a fetus developing in the womb, by the time, I think it's something like 4 weeks or 6 weeks, there are 3 core tissues which have developed in the fetus, and they're called the endoderm, the mesoderm, and the ectoderm, which means outer tissue, middle tissue, and inner tissue. And the brainstem is formed from the organs, that relate to the brainstem are formed from one of these layers called the endoderm. And so all the tissues that develop in the fetus that later become these different organs, such as the stomach and the large intestine and the small intestine, in other words, the digestive tract, are all developed from this one tissue layer called the endoderm. And this endoderm layer it produces tissues which are specifically correlated to our survival and our digestion, and also our reproduction, which of course is also survival of the species. Reproduction is to do with survival of the species. And so this endoderm layer and the tissues that are created, the organs and the tissues that are created from this endoderm layer, which are all the gut organs, correlate exactly with the reptilian part of the brain. So that's really quite a fascinating piece of information. And so our gut is about survival. Our digestive tract, from the mouth to the anus and everything in between, which is one long tract, is about our survival. And from an emotional perspective, if we come back to these 5 steps of digestion, first of all, we have to check out our environment. Am I safe? And yes, I'm talking physical, but I'm also talking emotional, and they're both connected. So for example, if you were looking to buy a new house and you walked into it and it was in the worst street in your city, like the really worst street, and I had an experience of living in the worst street in a suburb at one point, so I'm sort of using this as a direct example, is that when you go to look at that house, you're checking out, do I feel physically safe, but at the same time, do I feel emotionally safe? And we're using all our senses to do that. Or for example, if you're in an abusive relationship, you're going to constantly be checking, am I physically safe? Am I emotionally safe? So first of all, we use our senses to check our environment. And then we have to ingest what is going on in our environment. And then we have to digest what is going on in our environment. And we have to deal with what is not safe, what doesn't feel safe. And then we have to let go of what we don't need from our environment, what is not safe. which may mean, for example, if somebody is in an abusive relationship, they need to let go of that relationship. Because if they don't, the body will continue to send feedback that it doesn't feel safe, and that will play out physically in the body, because there is no separation between what happens at a physical, mental, or emotional level in the body. It's all connected. And it's in our language. Everything, if you watch your language, you can actually see what's going on at a mind-body level. So for example, you could say, well, I got stuck in my throat, or the tears welled up in my throat, or I couldn't stomach that, or I found that hard to digest, or I couldn't swallow that, or I was sick with worry, or I can't let it go. So our phrases can actually help us see what part of the digestive system are we stuck at? What part of the digestive system have we got emotions going on that are not able to move through to the next stage? And different emotions affect different parts of our digestive tract. So our liver is under the right rib cage, and so if we feel angry, because anger comes from that area of the body and it affects that area of the body, if we feel anger or frustrated or have resentment, then that emotion is going to affect our liver and our gallbladder. And worry and overthinking affect the stomach, which is over on the left-hand side of the body more, under the left ribs. So it affects the stomach and the pancreas. And so if we're overthinking things, or we're worrying, or we have anxiety, then that is going to affect our stomach. And the role of our stomach is to start breaking down and digesting our food. So it means that we're not breaking down and digesting our emotions, and we're not dealing with the situations. We're just worrying about them and thinking about them. And fear affects our kidneys. Fear and stress affect the kidneys. So and sadness affects the lungs. So different emotions have an effect on different parts of the body. And whilst they probably affect the whole of the body, they do affect different parts of the body. And so we can really, really see how different emotions correlate to different symptoms in the body. So here's an example of a client. A long time ago, I worked with a lady who was 74 years old, and she had severe abdominal pain, absolutely excruciating abdominal pain, in the lower left side, which was basically her descending colon. And she had just spent the last 3 months in hospital being tested for everything that they could think of to test her. So lots of invasive tests. And at the end of it, they had proved inconclusive. They could not find anything physically wrong, although she had this excruciating pain. And she came to me for some sessions. And on the second or third session, what came to light was a piece of information that she had buried in her unconscious that she'd forgotten about because it had been too painful to deal with. But you see, the body never forgets. The body remembers everything, and it stores everything. And it's very clever. It will store things until it feels we're ready to deal with them. And the other great thing about the body is it will never give us anything that we're not ready to deal with. So we can always know that we will be safe, even though things can feel overwhelming sometimes. So what came to light was the issue that when her mother had died, her mother had been in a hospital, and she had gone to visit her one day, and then she said, okay, I'll be back to see you tomorrow. And she was quite close with her mother. And when she came back the next day, she discovered that her mother had died in between her leaving the day before. And so she had never said goodbye. She'd never got to say goodbye. And in that moment, the grief and the trauma of that got stuck in her body because she just didn't know how to deal with it. And it got lodged somewhere in her digestive system. And the interesting thing about the colon, which is the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the descending colon, which altogether we call the large intestine, the interesting thing about the colon is that it is about letting go of what we don't need anymore. If you think about it from a physical perspective, our body is actually taking away the waste through the colon. And so she had not been able to let go of this grief. And when she connected in with it, as we worked together, she felt that. She felt it emotionally and she felt it physically, and then it shifted and it passed. So it was allowed to continue to pass through the large intestine and out of the body. So that is how our body, how closely our digestive tract is connected with not just physical digestion, but emotional digestion. We have to digest our emotions. And the number one thing to remember is that it's all about safety. Our body is trying to keep us alive at every second of every moment of every day. But we don't tend to think about that very much. But our body is doing that nevertheless. It is automatically, continuously assessing, am I safe? Am I safe physically? Am I safe emotionally? And if it comes up with a yes and a yes to both those questions, then we tend to feel happy and healthy. But if we don't feel safe or we don't feel happy, we're just not happy about something that is going on in our life, and it could be partner, relationship, family, job, finances, it could be any number of issues. But if our body is not happy or safe with what is going on in our life, then it is going to feed back those findings to us. And initially it might not come in thoughts, it will come in sensations from the body. So our body is perfectly designed to speak to us, but it just doesn't speak to us in English or Chinese or whatever language you speak. It speaks its own body language. So we have to start to learn to interpret what our body is telling us through sensations and through emotions, because it's a feedback system, and we're here to learn how to interpret that. So if you want to watch the audio visual of this little presentation, go to my YouTube channel and search for Art of Health, and do join me on Facebook, Kim Knight, Art of Health, or my website, artofhealth.co.nz. And I look forward to speaking again soon.